Nerd Morning, everyone. My name is Jeremy, and today on the Nerd Morning Show, we're going to be talking about the Bechdel test. Now, the Bechdel test is a test that's used inside of media to see how it is measuring up towards female representation in that story. It has three different elements that you need to pass in order to be able to pass the Bechdel test. Those three elements are having two female characters that talk to each other, and that conversation is not about a man. So those are the three things: having two female characters, have them talk to each other, and then that conversation has to be not about a man. Now, this is an interesting test to exemplify female interactions inside of cinema, inside of books, inside of all these different types of things, and to see how that measures up. Because if you only have one female character in that story, it will not pass the Bechdel test. If you have them talking, but all they're doing is fawning over a guy, then they will not pass the Bechdel test. And this is the goal of this, is to have diverse, complex female characters in stories, and to be able to have them have different wants and passions and desires and dreams, and being a fully rounded out complex character, and to have more than one of these female complex characters in that story. Now, I'm going to qualify what I think about this by saying that not every single story, I think, has to pass the Bechdel test. Most all stories should, and should be expected to, I think. But a good example is Shawshank Redemption, which is a story about these men who are thrown in a prison, and it's an all-male prison, and what they're trying to do, it just does not fit with having that strong female representation inside of that story. And it's a great story, it's a powerful, meaningful story, and I think there are reasons, logical reasons, why it wouldn't pass the Bechdel test. Now, most stories do not have such a reasonable cause to have this not pass the Bechdel test. There are tons of superhero stories that don't pass, or even sci-fi's, adventure stories, all these different things. And I'm there are so many females in the world, virtually half of all of the population are female, and so you would have in a story, unless there's some really, really provoking reason not to, that you would naturally always be passing the Bechdel test. What I'm ultimately saying is that stories should be passing the Bechdel test far more often than they do. And I think we can see how easy it would be to pass the Bechdel test by flipping it. By flipping it to the reverse Bechdel test, which is the Bechdel test on saying, how do we test the male representation in media by using the same qualifications for passing the Bechdel test, but for men. And that would be having two male characters that talk to each other, and it's not to be about a woman. Well, virtually every single movie in Hollywood passes the reverse Bechdel test. But yet so many of these don't pass the Bechdel test, which is the female representation. And I think that that's really, really interesting. And there are tons of reasons why this is the case. And I'm not really diving into things like the lack of female directors or all that kind of stuff, which I think has a lot of issues that we need to maybe explore and deal with as a society. But overall, I'm just talking about just story and how the end product doesn't necessarily line up, and why I think that that's valuable. Female representation is reason enough to want to make stories pass the Bechdel test far more often than they do now. But beyond all of those things, I think as a story reader and watcher and an enjoyer of different stories, I want to have good, complex characters. I want all of my characters to be deep, rich, and complex. And passing the Bechdel test means the world building is going to be stronger because there's going to be this diversity of characters. There's also going to be though they have male characters and female characters, both are going to be represented in a better light. And honestly, that means better stories. And so I'm all for it. Now, something I will note as well is the bar is really, really low here. Having two female characters that just have one single conversation where it's not about a man, like that can be a checkout at the grocery store. That's a really, really low bar to pass the Bechdel test. Like that is something that is so easily obtainable. That would be inside of Iron Man 1, the first Iron Man, to have Pepper Potts talk to one female character, yet so many movies don't. And I think it just blows my mind that that's seemingly so challenging. But we live in this world where there are so many different type of people, and having the representation of these different types of people is really important. And does the Bechdel test serve all of those purposes? No, it doesn't. But does it maybe help us think about that a little bit more? And maybe does it help us push towards having better representation for all different type of individuals? I think it does, and I think that that's really worthwhile and meaningful. What do you guys think about the Bechdel test? Do you feel like it's a helpful, beneficial thing? Do you think that it has meaningful exceptions? Do you think that it is something that should be seen as a standard when people are writing stories? Let me know. Put all of those in the comments. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Also, you can check out my gaming channel here on YouTube, as well as find me on other social media platforms like Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll catch you guys next time.